He smiled when he betrayed you, and you believed that smile. You mistook it for sincerity. You called it friendship. You thought his calm voice, his careful words, his steady tone were proof of peace. But they were not. They were tactics. And now, as you sit in silence, remembering the moment it all unraveled, your position, your reputation, your advantage, you ask yourself the same question every naive man asks after being destroyed by someone who never raised his voice. How could I not see it coming? The answer is simple. You still think cruelty comes with noise. You still think danger announces itself. You still think the man who shakes your hand and praises your loyalty is incapable of using you as a step. But he isn't. In fact, it's that very warmth, the smile, the stillness, the polished tone that makes him so effective. Because in a world ruled by appearances, the calmest man is often the one who's already made his move before you even know the game began. You see, the great mistake of most men is assuming that truth and friendliness are the same, that someone who listens must be honest, that someone who laughs must mean well. You think betrayal feels loud, like rage, like conflict, like accusation. But real betrayal doesn't need volume. It only needs timing. It only needs the illusion of safety. And the man who hurt you most likely did not scream. He did not insult you. He did not raise his hand. He shook yours. He nodded. He sympathized. And while you were being disarmed by his pleasant tone, his strategy was already unfolding beneath the surface. Because this world, if you haven't noticed yet, is not ruled by blunt violence or obvious threats. It is ruled by charming architects of illusion. Men who understand that the greatest weapon is the one that smiles at you while it waits. You weren't naive because you cared. You were naive because you still believed appearances were evidence, that men with soft eyes and open hands couldn't have sharp intentions, that a civil conversation meant alignment, that shared laughter meant loyalty. But understand this now, or bleed again later. The most effective men in power are never the ones who threaten you openly. They are the ones who disguise ambition as empathy, who master the cadence of humility, who offer transparency just long enough to extract what they need. They do not wear armor, they wear charm. And because you were taught to associate politeness with goodness, you never questioned the man whose entire presence was engineered to put you at ease. Let me tell you something brutal but useful. The smile is not the mark of peace. It is the camouflage of the patient predator. And if he smiled when he betrayed you, it's because he knew you weren't ready, because he saw how much you craved affirmation, because he knew your guard could be bypassed by kindness. And once he learned that, the rest was simple. So now you must unlearn what made you vulnerable. You must begin to see that the most dangerous man in the room is not the loud one, not the angry one, not the one who threatens. It is the one who seems most composed, most agreeable, most diplomatic. He is not there to speak. He is there to assess. And when he smiles, he is not confirming your trust. He is confirming your weakness. You still believe appearances are accidental, that a man's tone is just how he talks, that the way he dresses, the way he nods, the way he stands, the way he phrases his compliments, these are incidental, but they're not. They are armor, they are theater, they are carefully selected instruments of control. And the sooner you understand that the world does not respond to truth, but to the performance of truth, the faster you will stop being devoured by men who smile while you bleed. Understand? The world is not ruled by those who are right, or even those who are strong. It is ruled by those who know how to appear both at the right time. Reality does not matter to the masses. Perception does. And if you think power lies in being correct, being fair, being authentic, you are already on your knees. Because power belongs to the one who designs what others believe is real. And he does this not with facts, but with symbols, expressions, appearances. In Florence, I watched entire councils fall to men who said nothing sharp, made no visible threats, and carried no sword. But their robes were tailored, their language was precise, their faces calm. And because of this, men assumed wisdom where there was only training, authority where there was only performance. These men ruled not through excellence, but through excellence of disguise. And the people, needing comfort, needing certainty, saw the appearance of composure and mistook it for clarity. They bowed, not because they were forced, but because the mask was convincing. And that is the greatest trick of appearances. They do not just hide the truth, they rewrite it. You still think transparency is powerful. You think showing your thoughts makes you strong. But what does the world actually reward? The man who is direct, or the man who dresses his ambition in softness? Look around you. Who holds status? Who commands rooms? It is not the most capable, it is the most calculated. The ones who know how to speak when silence is expected and how to remain silent when others panic. They have learned what you refuse to study, that the average man does not respond to substance. He responds to familiarity, to poise, to rhythm. And if you master these surfaces, you can rule, even while telling lies that would burn others to ash. Appearances are not deception, they are structure. They are the scaffolding of power. And every man who has ever risen understood that you must look the part long before you are allowed to play it. That means you must dress for the title you haven't earned, speak with the weight of decisions you haven't yet made, smile with the confidence of a man who already won. Because if you don't, someone else will. And that man, simply by appearing the part, will receive what should have been yours. Respect is not allocated by truth, it is allocated by presentation. This is why weak men cannot hold power, because they rely on truth to justify their presence. They expect to be respected because they mean well, because they're honest, because they're trying. But the world doesn't measure effort, it measures impression. And the man who seems powerful is always preferred to the man who asks to be seen that way. The smile is more persuasive than the fact, the posture more enduring than the argument, and the appearance of strength is far more respected than strength itself, because most people will never test it. They will obey what they believe is firm, not what actually is. So ask yourself, when you enter a room, do they see clarity or do they see curiosity? Do they feel you own the space or that you're waiting for permission? Do you appear to need something from them? Or do they feel the quiet pressure of needing something from you? That shift, that reversal of expectation is the currency of power. And it begins not with force but with appearance. A steady eye, a still jaw, a slow breath, a refusal to fill silence, a presence that does not react to discomfort. These are not affectations, these are weapons. And every ruler, every merchant, every strategist who ever rose above mediocrity learned to use them. You thought your truth would speak for itself. It won't. It never did. Truth without shape is noise. Power without posture is ignored. And a man who walks in with honesty but no control of how it lands, he is not respected. He is studied, then bypassed. The world does not want what is accurate. It wants what feels certain. And feelings, my friend, are governed by the surface. That's why appearances do not just matter, they dominate. You've been told since birth that truth has its own gravity. That if you just speak honestly, if you just live with integrity, the world will eventually align itself around you. You were told that facts matter, that virtue speaks for itself, that the truth, no matter how painful, will earn respect. But I have seen republics collapse while truth stood screaming in the streets. I have seen the most honest man in a court be the first to be exiled. And I have seen lies, polished, pleasant, and easy to digest, elevate cowards into rulers. So let me make this clear. Truth is not what rules the world. Performance does. And the man who knows how to perform truth will always defeat the man who tries to prove it. You think honesty is rare and that its rarity will make it valuable. But rarity without polish is not value, it's discomfort. And discomfort is punished. The people, the masses, the rulers, the lovers, the voters, they do not crave truth. They crave safety, they crave clarity, and most of all, they crave the feeling of certainty. If your truth makes them uneasy, you will be dismissed, not because you are wrong, but because you are inconvenient. The man who performs the truth, who shapes it into palatable rhythm, who smiles while delivering sharp conclusions, who hides the jagged edge beneath velvet language, he will be applauded. Not because he is real, but because he is useful. You were outperformed by a liar, and you still don't understand why. He took credit for your ideas. He used your vulnerability as ammunition. He reshaped the narrative and positioned himself as the calm voice of reason while you defended what was right. And in the end, he won. Not because he was better, but because he never tried to be right. He tried to appear right. And that, in this world, is what crowns men. Appearance of correctness, not correctness itself. That's the game. And until you play it, you will keep losing to men with smaller minds but sharper masks. So stop believing your sincerity will save you. It won't. Power does not reward transparency. It rewards utility. And honesty without performance has no utility in a world governed by optics. If your truth creates friction, you must learn how to veil it. If your vision creates discomfort, you must learn how to soften the landing. Not because you are cowardly, but because you are strategic. Because being right too soon is the same as being wrong in the eyes of power. And because this world is not ruled by truth-tellers, it is ruled by those who can make lies look noble. This is why you must study not just the truth, but how it is presented. Learn to speak in rhythm. Learn to mask your sharpest judgments in gentleness. Learn to say less than you know and mean more than you say. Learn to shape your message so that the lie-eaters around you will still applaud. Not because you've changed what you believe, but because you've learned how to deliver it in a world allergic to sharp edges. If you must lie to survive, lie with purpose. If you must flatter to maneuver, do so without guilt. But above all, do not reveal truth without performance. Because performance without truth will win. But truth without performance will not even be heard. This is not a game for the honest. It is a game for the calibrated, for those who understand that truth must be worn like a blade beneath robes, not waved in the streets like a flag. Those who scream truth are silenced. Those who smile while holding it become kings. The sooner you understand this, the sooner you will stop being outmaneuvered by actors. Because the man who knows how to perform, even if he knows nothing else, will always rise faster than the man who tells the truth with his throat exposed. You do not live in a world that rewards truth. You live in a world that rewards what looks like truth. So if you want to rule in it, stop shouting your ideas. Start building your costume. You think the lie is the problem, that if you could just expose it, if you could just show people the contradiction, the fraud would unravel. But you forget something. The lie itself is not what persuades, it's the way it is delivered. Most people don't believe a liar because of the logic of his words. They believe him because of the weight of his confidence, because he says it calmly, because he looks them in the eye, because he doesn't flinch. The truth you stuttered through, the facts you tried to defend, the sincerity you wore like armor, none of it mattered. Because he said less than you, but he said it without doubt. Confidence is not a reflection of truth. It's a tool of dominance, and the men who lie with conviction are not ashamed. They are obeyed. You expect lies to come wrapped in guilt, in nervousness, in hesitance, but you're wrong. The most dangerous lies come dressed in certainty, in ease, in precision. And this is what fools you. You assume conviction must mean credibility, but what it actually means is preparation, performance. A rehearsed mask so convincing that even you begin to question what you know. He doesn't need to be correct. He only needs to be more certain than you. And the audience, trained by fear and fatigue, will choose the louder lie over the quieter truth every time. You still believe exposure equals downfall, that if you pull the mask away, he'll fall. But you forget, the mask isn't hiding his weakness. The mask is his weapon. It isn't covering shame. It's manufacturing dominance. And if you try to rip it off in front of others, they won't thank you. They'll turn on you. Because they don't want to see what's behind the smile. They want to believe in it. It gives them relief. It gives them order. And the man who disrupts that illusion, even with good intentions, is treated not as a liberator but as a threat. That's why you failed. You brought doubt to their certainty. You brought friction to their fantasy. You forced them to question the man who promised them simplicity. And they resented you for it. The liar didn't beat you with better arguments. He beat you with poise, with repetition, with a calm voice that never rose. And now you sit in the aftermath, asking how the lie survived. It survived because he understood one thing. Certainty is more persuasive than truth. And because you didn't, he took your place while you defended your principles. Do you know why courts prefer the man who speaks less? Why juries believe the composed over the passionate? Because people are trained to associate calm with control, stillness with truth, composure with power. And when a man lies, but lies smoothly, he doesn't just deceive, he ascends. Because in a world where most are overwhelmed by chaos, the liar who offers clarity, no matter how false, becomes a savior. This is why you must study the confident liar, not to become him, but to beat him. Learn the tone, learn the cadence, learn the stillness, then embed your truth in that same delivery. Don't argue, announce, don't convince, project. If you must destroy the lie, don't debate it, replace it with a truth delivered more powerfully. Because the world does not choose what is right, it chooses what is persuasive. And until your truth is more persuasive than his performance, your righteousness will remain irrelevant. So stop waiting for his lie to collapse. It won't. Not on its own. It must be outperformed. And the only man who can do that is the one who learns to weaponize calm as ruthlessly as he does conviction. You still believe the smile means safety. That warmth in the face is warmth in the heart. That someone who speaks softly must mean no harm. But the smile is not a symbol of peace. It is a weapon. It is the softest mask ever made, and it has been used by cowards and kings alike to build trust before betrayal. You were taught to interpret the smile as sincerity, but I will tell you what it actually signals: preparation. It means the plan is already in motion. It means the blade is already drawn, but hidden behind the curtain of civility. And if you continue treating the smile as proof of virtue, you will walk into every trap laid by a man who studied your mind before he spoke. Men do not smile to comfort you. They smile to conceal what they've measured. A genuine smile is rare. What you usually see is a strategic pause in expression, a way of disarming your suspicion just long enough to gain access. And once they have access, once you begin to open your thoughts, your intentions, your insecurities, they stop smiling inwardly. Because the work is done. The smile is no longer needed. They have what they came for, and you gave it freely because you mistook their softness for safety. I have watched assassins smile at their victims. I have seen ministers promise loyalty while smiling, even as they handed over secret letters to the enemy. I have seen lovers smile as they planned their exit. Because a man who intends harm but still needs access must appear kind. This is not new. This is ancient. Caesar was warned with smiles. Jesus was betrayed with a kiss. The most efficient betrayals always begin with familiarity. And the most efficient familiarity always begins with the smile. You expect your enemies to look like villains, but they don't. They look like friends. They shake your hand. They lower their voice. They compliment your insight. And slowly they learn how to position themselves in your blind spot. And when the strike comes, you're not even angry. You're confused. You ask yourself, how could he? And I will answer you. Because you were still reading his expression like a child reads faces, not like a strategist reads signals. To survive, you must destroy this habit. You must see the smile not as reassurance, but as an alert. You must learn that the calmest face may hold the coldest intent. That warmth is often a tool used by the coldest minds. That people do not disarm you by accident. They do it because they studied what made you feel safe and they weaponized it. And yes, you must learn to do the same. Smile when you enter a negotiation, smile when you speak to a rival, smile when you deliver uncomfortable truths, but never because you're hiding softness. Smile because you are hiding advantage. Make your presence feel disarming so that when you act, it is too late for them to resist. But do not let your own mind be fooled. Kindness is not always fake, but when it is paired with opportunity, it almost always is. The smile is camouflage, nothing more. And until you learn to see through it, you will continue to mistake predators for partners. You weren't just fooled by the mask. You were trained to trust it. From the beginning, by your teachers, by your parents, by your institutions, you were conditioned to look for signals of safety that mean nothing. You were taught to obey soft voices, to listen to credentials, to nod at polite phrasing, to believe that clean clothing and practiced smiles signaled moral intention, that if someone looked you in the eye and spoke with poise, they were good. You were trained to associate tone with truth, presentation with character. And you were punished when you questioned someone who meant well. But let me tell you what I have seen across republics, across courts, across betrayals. The more polished the presentation, the more practiced the lie. It is not a coincidence that the most dangerous men often look the most composed. It is not an accident that the greatest manipulators are the most liked. It is by design. Because the world is built to reward the man who doesn't just act, but acts while appearing harmless. You were told to focus on content, not delivery. But what wins in this world is not content. It's confidence. It's calmness. It's camouflage. And the man who delivers poison in a velvet voice will always be preferred to the man who delivers truth with tension. And now, look where you are. You've been passed over, outperformed, undermined by men who seem less intelligent, less capable, less sincere. And yet, they rise. They are promoted, they are followed, they are trusted with responsibilities they are not qualified to handle. Why? Because they mastered the art of being readable. And you, in your honesty, in your seriousness, in your refusal to perform, became uncomfortable to those around you, because you reminded them that the truth is not always pleasing. That power, when real, is not always pretty. And they resented you for it. Not because you were wrong, but because you disrupted the choreography they were trained to dance. You see, the mask is not just used by the deceivers. It is expected by the audience. The average person does not want reality. They want ritual. They want the calm tone, the clean look, the non-threatening posture. They want the surface. And anyone who refuses to provide it is pushed out. The mask is not just a deception. It is a requirement. And if you refuse to wear it, you will be treated as a danger, no matter how noble your intent. So what must you do? You must stop arguing with the structure. Stop trying to prove that you are different because you're honest. Because they don't care. Learn to wear the mask. Not to lie, but to navigate. Not to deceive, but to enter. Put on the face they expect. Speak in the tone they trust. Match their rhythm, then act. Quietly, strategically, precisely, and because this is not about being false, it's about being unseen until necessary. You were trained to trust the mask, but now you must become the man who can wear it, and never forget what it's hiding. Do you still doubt that masks rule the world? Then let me show you the record that never lies. History. And not the romantic version. Not the one told by poets or idealists. I speak of real history. The kind written in blood and sealed in exile. In Florence, I watched the most dangerous men rise not through force but through performance. They smiled at their enemies, toasted their rivals, praised their opponents in public while plotting their ruin in private. They understood that appearances were not an accessory to power. They were power. And those who failed to manage perception, even the ones with the purest intent, were eaten first. You admire the truth-teller. But in Florence, the truth-teller was the first to be silenced, the man who warned the Republic, who saw the corruption, who dared to speak plainly. He wasn't promoted. He was removed, because the truth, when naked and loud, creates fear, and fear must be neutralized. But the man who whispered lies with poise, who assured the people everything was fine while arranging his takeover, he was crowned. Why? Because he protected the illusion. And the people, like children afraid of the dark, will follow any man who smiles while locking the door. In Rome, the church perfected this. It offered peace while waging war. It preached humility while hoarding treasure. It spoke of eternity while selling indulgences for coin. The Pope wore white to signal purity, but his robes hid the sharpest minds in Italy. Men who knew that power was not in prayer but in perception. The rituals, the incense, the choirs, none of it existed to honor God. It existed to hypnotize the crowd, to make them feel reverence even when what stood before them was a throne, not a pulpit. You may find this cynical, but I was there. I spoke with the diplomats, the generals, the bishops. I saw how power moved, not in truth but in spectacle, not in virtue but in performance. Even the Vatican understood to rule men you must rule the theater. And to rule the theater you must perfect the mask. If the Pope had stood on the balcony and admitted corruption, admitted human nature, admitted politics, it would have shattered the spell. But by smiling, blessing, and dressing like divinity, he preserved not only the office, but the obedience. That is the lesson. Truth does not produce loyalty. A beautiful lie repeated with dignity does. And now you sit in a world far removed from Florence, far from Rome. But nothing has changed. The men who rise today smile the same way. They speak of justice while expanding their control. They praise merit while rewarding submission. They smile in debates not to persuade but to disarm. They know the camera does not record intention. It records calm. And the masses, still addicted to the appearance of order, still worship the smile, not because they are foolish but because they are tired. So don't ask why the righteous fall. Ask why they keep expecting to win without a costume. The Florentines who failed were not weak. They were unmasked. They walked into courts with ideas, not performance. And they were devoured by men who understood the deeper law. It is not the content of your virtue that matters. It is how you wear it. You don't need to betray yourself to play this game, but you do need to learn how it's played. And history will teach you, if you stop reading it like scripture and start reading it like a strategy manual. You still think danger looks sharp. You still think you'll recognize it by tone, by threat, by intensity. But in my experience, the most dangerous people in the world are not the loudest. They are the nicest. They are agreeable, smiling, always reasonable. They lower your guard with every word, and while you interpret their gentleness as goodness, they are assessing your weaknesses, calculating how to use your softness against you. You don't fear them because they don't trigger your instincts. That's their power. They don't feel like conflict. They feel like trust. And trust, when placed in the wrong hands, is how empires collapse. Kindness is the most reliable cover for strategic ambition. It buys time. It buys loyalty. And it silences suspicion. You would never expect betrayal from the man who remembers your birthday, who asks about your family, who flatters your intelligence. But understand this: niceness is a performance, a routine of behaviors rehearsed to appear harmless, to win access, to soften resistance, to become invisible in plain sight. And the most ruthless men I have ever known used it like armor. They never raised their voices, they never argued. They agreed with you until the moment you were irrelevant. They don't show dominance, they imply it through stability, through patience, through their ability to make you feel calm while they close the distance. And when the time comes, they strike once, cleanly, without hesitation, not out of rage, but because they waited, because you were unguarded, because they had practiced their mask so well that when they finally showed what they really were, it was already too late for you to run. I knew a man in Florence who smiled more than he spoke. Every diplomat trusted him. Every rival overlooked him. He never interrupted. He never raised his hand. He sat in silence until others revealed their plans, and then he quietly realigned his own. When he moved, it was never loud. But his enemies vanished one by one. And when he was finally accused, no one could prove anything. His voice was still calm. His expression was still gentle. His mask was still intact, and the court praised him for his grace under fire, never realizing that grace had always been his weapon. This is what you must learn. Stop fearing anger. Anger is loud, chaotic, impulsive. It burns too quickly to be strategic. But niceness is measured. It is used to infiltrate. It is used to earn roles, invitations, proximity. You don't guard yourself against the man who agrees with you. You open the door. And when you do, he steps inside, not because he likes you, but because you've made his job easy. This is not to say that kindness is always false. But the kind man who never disagrees, who never asserts, who never defends his own frame, he is not your friend. He is studying you. And if you do not learn to see niceness as a tactic, you will keep calling betrayal a surprise. It isn't. It's a slow, polite entry through the door you opened yourself. You assume the deceiver is chaotic, that he improvises, that he lies on instinct. But the most effective deceivers are not erratic. They are engineers. They think in systems, not reactions. They don't lie just to escape blame. They lie to shape reality. The deceiver is not driven by impulse. He is driven by design. Every word he speaks has weight. Every gesture is rehearsed. Every silence is loaded with implication. And when you face a man like this, your honesty becomes a liability, not because it's wrong, but because it's unstructured. You think out loud. He constructs narratives. You explain. He frames. You defend. He directs the camera. The deceiver understands one thing most men never grasp. People do not seek truth. They seek coherence. They want stories that make sense, patterns that feel familiar, heroes and villains that fit their biases. And the deceiver provides exactly that. He doesn't just speak to your ears, he speaks to your needs. He mirrors your fears, he reflects your hopes. He places himself in the story you already believe, and by doing so, he becomes trusted, not because he earned it, but because he fit the shape you were looking for. This is why deceivers rise, not because they overpower others, but because they match expectations faster than anyone else. They know what tone to use, what phrases to repeat, what roles to play. They watch carefully, especially in rooms where truth is dangerous, and they speak only when they've read the room like a map. And when they do speak, they don't argue. They imply. They don't force conclusions, they guide you there subtly. So that by the time you believe the lie, you think you arrived at it yourself. And here's the part you refuse to accept. They don't feel guilty. The deceiver is not burdened by conscience. He doesn't see his lie as betrayal. He sees it as control, as architecture, as the shaping of perception toward a necessary end. You think he's hiding who he is, but to him there is no real self to protect. There is only the mask that gets results, and he wears it with pride, not because he wants to hurt you, but because you are a means, not a mission. I've watched them operate in courts, in marriage chambers, in war councils. They are not always the most powerful, but they are always the most protected, because while others speak emotionally, they construct strategically. And by the time their web is exposed, they've already escaped its consequences. The deceiver is 5 moves ahead, not because he is brilliant, but because he started planning while you were still trusting. You must learn this, not to become him, but to stop being his prey. You must understand that honesty is not protection unless it is combined with structure. If your truth has no edge, no rhythm, no delivery, it will lose to a lie that's simply better dressed. The deceiver understands that the mind does not obey facts. It obeys persuasion. And persuasion is not moral. It is mechanical. You think he betrayed you. He didn't. He outperformed you in the only game that matters, the control of perception. Power has learned that the more visible it is, the more vulnerable it becomes. In older times, it announced itself in armor, in banners, in decrees, in raw force. But the world has changed. Power today does not roar. It whispers, it smiles, it waits. It wears manners like silk over steel. And it no longer demands obedience by fear alone. It disarms resistance by being agreeable. The most effective power does not trigger your alarm bells. It makes you nod. It flatters. It apologizes. It never breaks the rules openly. It simply bends them with such finesse that no one notices until it's too late. This is why politeness is no longer just a virtue. It is a strategy. Power, when direct, creates tension. But power cloaked in civility slides through gates without resistance. And the man who understands this doesn't need to assert dominance. He creates it by removing suspicion. He hides his ambitions behind gentle words. He wraps commands in compliments. He speaks slowly, calmly, as if nothing is urgent, even when everything is being decided behind closed doors. And those around him, untrained to recognize this softness as strategic, mistake his calm for harmlessness. You were raised to believe that politeness signals humility, that a man who speaks gently must mean well. But I tell you this, the men who have destroyed the most lives have done so without raising their voices. They did it in meeting rooms, in dinners, in smooth memos, in calm statements crafted by teams of handlers. They didn't conquer by fear, they conquered by being more socially fluent than their enemies. And when they smiled, the crowd smiled back, never knowing the blade was already in motion. I have watched rulers fall because they failed to adapt, because they still thought power meant visible strength. But the world no longer bows to loudness, it bows to polish, to control of tone, to the illusion of cooperation. And those who rise fastest today are not those who demand the most, but those who seem like they demand nothing at all. They listen, they empathize, and behind every nod is a map of how to remove you without confrontation. You don't see it because you don't expect harm to come dressed as harmony. But it does. It always has. The most dangerous orders are not barked. They are softly issued. The most irreversible decisions are not argued. They are agreed upon in a room where no one raised their voice. And once it's done, you'll wonder why you didn't stop it sooner. The answer is simple. Because it didn't look like power. It looked like peace. So what do? You stop being disarmed by tone. You learn to separate intention from expression. You stop giving trust to the man who performs humility better than others, and you start watching what happens when you say no. How does he react then? That's when you'll see him. Not in his speech, but in his silence, in his shift, in the way he recalibrates without showing a single crack. Because true power, when disguised in politeness, does not disappear. It becomes more dangerous. You were told to be virtuous, to be good, upright, transparent. You believed that if you were consistent in principle, unwavering in integrity, you would be elevated, recognized, respected, trusted. But you misunderstood the system entirely. This world does not reward virtue. It rewards the performance of virtue. And the man who appears moral, who presents decency like a carefully rehearsed ritual, will always be trusted more than the man who lives virtuously but refuses to package it for display. I wrote this plainly. It is not necessary for a prince to be truly virtuous. It is necessary that he appear so. Because people do not inspect the soul. They observe the costume. The people judge by what they see. And what they see must soothe them. It must flatter their ideals. It must confirm their expectations. The honest man who speaks harsh truths is punished. The liar who nods and smiles while repeating sacred phrases, he is welcomed. Perception is the god they serve. Reality is too complicated. This is why you will see incompetent men rise while better men stay invisible. It is not because the world is blind. It is because the world is tired. It does not have the patience to evaluate character deeply. So it uses signals, smiles, manners, empathy theater. The man who performs just enough compassion, who sprinkles his ambition with moral language, is elevated, not because he has proven his integrity, but because he has mastered the choreography of trust. In the courts of Florence, I watched this happen endlessly. A man would speak of fairness, justice, the good of the people. He would give speeches about peace, host public events, embrace the appearance of the common good. But behind the curtain he traded favors, silenced rivals, rewrote laws. And no one challenged him. Why? Because he looked like virtue, he sounded like virtue, and people prefer appearance that comforts over truth that disrupts. The performance of virtue is more valuable than virtue itself because it gives you access without resistance. If you behave with ruthlessness but appear gentle, you are obeyed. If you behave with ambition but appear humble, you are rewarded. But if you carry true virtue without the performance, if you refuse to polish, to prepare, to conceal, it will be seen as arrogance. It will be seen as threat. You will be rejected not because you are wrong, but because you are too raw. So what must you do? You learn to separate moral behavior from moral performance. You understand that in this world your internal compass is meaningless without external presentation. That the truth, when it is sharp and sincere, must be wrapped in velvet. That your virtue must be tailored, not just practiced. You must learn to wear your goodness like a uniform, not to deceive but to survive, because they will not inspect your intentions. They will only judge how well you signal them. And if you refuse to play the game, do not complain when you are pushed out by someone who does, someone who smiles while lying and is rewarded for it. You believe systems reward merit, that institutions built on legacy and structure rise and fall based on performance and truth. You still think that if you do the right thing, if you speak clearly, if you stay honest, you will be recognized. But institutions do not reward truth. They reward stability. And the liar, when well-trained, provides more stability than the honest man who threatens disruption. This is why deception doesn't just survive in systems, it thrives. Every institution, no matter how noble its origin, eventually becomes more focused on preserving itself than on serving its original mission. And once that shift occurs, it no longer rewards results. It rewards those who can protect its illusion. The man who tells the truth is seen as a threat. The man who manages perception is seen as an asset. He may be incompetent. He may even be corrupt. But if he knows how to speak in meetings, how to frame losses as learning, how to shift blame without resistance, he becomes indispensable. I saw this in the chancelleries of Florence. The most beloved officials were not the most effective. They were the most agreeable. They knew how to bury problems beneath optimism. They knew how to make failure look like transition. They could attend every crisis without ever being tied to its origin. And because they never caused discomfort, because they never raised tension, they were promoted. Not because they solved anything, but because they preserved the rhythm of the structure. You must understand that institutions fear embarrassment more than failure. The man who lies well, who deceives with elegance, helps delay embarrassment. He protects the surface. He ensures the optics remain clean. And so long as the illusion holds, the machine continues. It doesn't matter if outcomes deteriorate beneath the surface. What matters is that the surface remains smooth. That's why you were sidelined. That's why you were overlooked. Because when you spoke plainly, you created friction. When you exposed inefficiency, you broke the spell. And institutions do not thank the man who brings clarity. They punish him. They call him difficult. They label him abrasive. And then they promote the one who smiled, nodded, and never challenged anything too directly. This is not failure of the system, this is the system. Designed to replicate itself, to reward compliance disguised as virtue, to elevate the polished deceiver over the blunt realist. You thought you were being noble, but nobility without diplomacy is liability. And while you bled for results, another man told a better story and he got the title. So what must you do? You learn the rules. You stop expecting recognition for effort. You start wrapping your clarity in palatable tones. You learn how to manage the illusion while moving your strategy beneath it. Not because you approve of the lie, but because you understand that until the institution collapses, only those who master the performance will be given the keys. You can either resent this or master it. But do not walk into a system that rewards smooth deception and expect sharp truth to be received with applause. It won't, not unless you hide the blade in your own smile. Let me speak clearly now, because too many of you still believe that being honest is enough. That if you speak the truth plainly, if you tell others what they don't want to hear, you will be respected. You believe that truth is its own protection, but you are wrong. The fool who tells the truth without power is not admired. He is eliminated, and not with force, with silence, with absence, with quiet exile. The system doesn't crush him, it simply ignores him until he disappears. You thought you were brave for speaking up, for exposing the flaw, for naming the hypocrisy. But all you did was alert the structure that you were not manageable. And systems do not keep men who are not manageable. They don't argue with you. They don't challenge your facts. They thank you. Then they move on, without you. You are not attacked. You are forgotten. Not because your truth was wrong, but because your presence became inconvenient. You see, the system has antibodies, and truth is a virus it knows how to suppress, especially when it comes without subtlety, when it is announced instead of embedded, when it is sharp without being shaped. The man who tells the truth without timing, without disguise, without leverage, he doesn't become a reformer. He becomes a target. And the worst part is, he believes he is winning. He thinks their silence is respect, but it is preparation. Preparation to replace him with someone more agreeable. I have seen it happen in every court, every council, every company. The truth-teller walks in thinking he's doing everyone a favor. And for a moment, they nod. They thank him. They applaud. But behind closed doors, the decision is made. He is too honest. He is too visible. He is too uncooperative with the lie that keeps the structure standing. And so, he is slowly removed, not because he was wrong, but because he spoke as if rightness was enough. Do not misunderstand me. Truth has power, but only when delivered like poison, carefully, quietly, in small doses, not like wine poured freely for anyone to drink. If you throw the truth at the table will turn on you. But if you learn to place it beneath the surface, if you let others discover it for themselves while thinking it was their idea, then you survive. Then you rise. The fool thinks that being right justifies exposure, that pointing out the flaw earns credibility. But credibility is not earned by disruption. It is earned by control. If your truth creates friction without strategy, you're not a leader. You're a liability. And if you speak the truth before your position is untouchable, you will be removed by men who are not half as right, but twice as prepared. So learn this now. It is not your duty to tell the truth. It is your duty to weaponize it correctly. And sometimes that means silence. Sometimes that means patience. Sometimes that means letting the lie persist until you are the one holding the knife, not the one standing in front of it. If you want to keep speaking truth, first build a fortress or prepare for exile. By now you know the truth. Your greatest threat is not the man who speaks too loudly, not the one who boasts, not the one who opposes you directly. It is the polished enemy, the one who agrees, who flatters, who smiles in meetings, who shakes your hand while rehearsing your replacement. This man will never look like opposition because he's studied what makes you feel safe, and he will reflect it. He will match your tone, echo your values, praise your insights. But beneath that softness is steel. He doesn't want to win the argument, he wants to win the outcome. And he knows the fastest way there is through agreement, not confrontation. So how do you spot him? First, look for stillness. The polished enemy doesn't rush, he doesn't scramble, he speaks in complete sentences, he doesn't interrupt. Not because he respects you, but because he's calculating. He lets you fill the silence so he can collect data. You think he's listening because he cares. He's listening because he knows the less he says, the less he can be pinned to. And the more you speak, the more predictable you become. Second, observe his language. The polished enemy never speaks in absolutes. He qualifies everything. That's an interesting point. There's some merit to that idea. We should explore that further. He creates the illusion of consensus while maintaining total ambiguity. This protects him. If something goes wrong, he can shift blame without effort. He never truly commits. He only appears cooperative. Third, watch his praise. Genuine people compliment substance. Polished enemies compliment tone. They praise how you said something, how you presented yourself, how well you navigated the situation. Their compliments are not gifts. They're tools. Tools to lower your guard, to make you believe they admire you. But they are only positioning themselves to take what you won't defend. Fourth, examine his posture under pressure. When something goes wrong, he never reacts emotionally. He never blames directly. He asks questions, he smiles, he appears thoughtful. But his eyes never soften. He's measuring how others react to the problem and adjusting his alignment in real time. He will never be the first to speak in a crisis, but he will be the one who leaves the room with more influence than he entered it with, not by solving, but by observing, by maneuvering, by surviving. Fifth, check his alliances. The polished enemy does not have friends, he has proximity. He stands beside whoever holds the advantage today. And when that advantage shifts, he shifts with it. He is not loyal, he is strategic. And if you mistake his presence for commitment, you will be blindsided when he supports your replacement with the same calm voice he once used to support you. This is the man who rises in institutions, who thrives in diplomacy, who is always invited but never blamed. You won't see him break the rules. He simply bends them until they serve his structure. And if you cannot identify him early, you will empower him unknowingly. So what do? You learn to match the mask without becoming the fool. You learn to smile, but only with one eye open. You build alliances, but never dependencies. And most of all, you remain silent when you're being flattered. Because when the polished enemy calls you brilliant, understand this. He is not praising you. He is pacifying you. Spotting him is not enough. You must outlast him, quietly, relentlessly, like he would do to you. You've now seen what the smile can do, how it disarms, how it disguises, how it buys access while hiding ambition. And you ask, if the smile is so dangerous, should I abandon it? That would be another mistake. The problem is not the smile itself. The problem is smiling without strategy. The weak smile to be liked, the naive smile to calm the room. But the ruler, the strategist, the man who understands perception, he smiles like a weapon, calmly, sparingly, with precision, and only when it benefits him. If you smile because you crave acceptance, you will be devoured. If you smile to ease conflict when you should enforce consequence, you will be overrun. But if you learn to smile with discipline, if you use it to mask your movement, to delay confrontation, to absorb attention while you work in silence, then it becomes your shield, a signal that you are not yet ready to strike, but that you are watching, and watching closely. Strategic smiling is not about being liked. It's about controlling emotional rhythm. When others expect resistance and you meet them with calm, they become unsure. When they expect anger and you deliver amusement, they become unsettled. Your smile becomes a form of psychological misdirection. Not because you are trying to soothe, but because you are resetting the board, because you are forcing them to question their read on you. And confusion is the first step toward influence, but there are rules. First, never smile to fill silence. The weak smile when they're uncomfortable. The strong let silence work. Hold eye contact. Say nothing. Let others interpret. A smile during silence should signal certainty, not submission. Second, never smile during correction. When you set a boundary, enforce a rule, or punish disrespect, do it cleanly. Do it coldly. Do it without warmth. Smiling in these moments sends mixed signals. It teaches others that your standards can be softened, that your authority is for negotiation. It is not. Third, smile when you deny. When someone asks for too much, when a rival makes a move, when someone tests your patience. That is the moment to smile. Not as approval, but as distance, as elevation. Let them see you smile, not because you agree, but because their attempt is beneath response. That smile makes them reconsider. It makes them wait. It makes them talk to others before trying again. Fourth, smile when others panic. When the room is tense, when the decision is hard, when others lose composure, that is when your smile has the most power. Not because it fixes anything, but because it signals command. It tells everyone watching that you are still thinking, still watching, still ready. And that composure itself is your proof of position. The fool smiles to gain favor. The wise man smiles to remind others he never lost it. You do not need to abandon the mask. You must learn to fit it with your intent. Smile with strategy, with silence behind it, with sharpness beneath it. Smile not because you are weak, but because you are prepared. Because the moment you can smile without being disarmed, you have become what others fear most. A man who looks calm but is always calculating. When I wrote The Prince, I spoke of Cesare Borgia not as a saint, but as a master of political reality. A man who understood that if you want to rise, if you want to maintain power among wolves, you must learn to mask your claws in velvet. You must learn to smile while sharpening the knife. And no one in my time did this better than Cesare. He was not the loudest, he was not the most beloved, but he was the most feared because he was the most composed. And his greatest victories were not won on battlefields. They were won at banquets. Cesare understood the illusion of civility. He knew that fear alone would invite rebellion, that cruelty, if visible, would create martyrs. So he dressed like a diplomat. He smiled like a prince. He spoke like a friend. And while his enemies relaxed, while they drank wine beside him, while they toasted alliances, while they accepted his gifts, he mapped out their executions, not out of sadism, but out of necessity. Because Cesare didn't want to fight battles, he wanted to end them before they began. And the smile was his most reliable weapon. He once invited his rivals to a reconciliation dinner. He gave them titles. He promised them peace. He flattered their egos. He welcomed them as if nothing had ever gone wrong. And when they let down their guard, when they laughed, when they drank, when they relaxed, he gave the signal. And they were eliminated in a single night. No trial, no debate, no spectacle, just clarity. A decisive act of consolidation. And the next morning Florence was quiet. Rome was quiet. There were no protests, because Cesare had smiled all the way through. He made it look like mercy until the very end. You might think this cruel, but cruelty with timing is not evil. It is design. It is strategy. And Cesare understood what few ever grasp. The smile delays resistance. It buys time. It lowers suspicion. And in that silence, you move. You execute. You restructure, you survive. Cesare's genius was not in deception for its own sake. It was in selective transparency. He revealed just enough to gain trust, but never enough to expose his position. He spoke of unity when he was dividing. He spoke of forgiveness when he was planning revenge. And because he never flinched, because he never raised his voice, because he never threatened, his enemies never saw it coming. He didn't just win. He ruled the aftermath. And when others asked me why I admired him, I answered plainly. Because he understood reality. Because he didn't ask the world to reward sincerity. He studied the world as it was and moved accordingly. He smiled not because he was kind, but because he knew when to speak softly and when to act finally. You can dismiss him. You can say, I am not that ruthless, but if you are not at least that aware, you will be ruled by men who are. You will be welcomed by smiles and destroyed in rooms you thought were safe. Unless you learn to recognize the signal, unless you learn to use it yourself. So remember Cesare not as a villain, but as a mirror of what is required to move through this world without begging it to be different. In politics, in court, in love, in war, you are not treated as you are. You are treated as you are perceived, and reputation is the weapon that strikes before you even enter the room. It is your first ambassador, your silent armor, your invisible sword. You were taught to focus on your behavior, on your effort. But the men who rule understand. Behavior shapes reality, yes, but reputation shapes access, and access is power. You want to be understood. You want to be seen for who you truly are. But that desire is a vulnerability. Because while you chase transparency, someone else is curating what the world thinks about them. And the world will follow the man who appears decisive, appears unbothered, appears worthy of attention. Even if he is none of these things in private, your reputation should not reflect your soul. It should reflect your intention. If your aim is influence, build a reputation that makes others pause before speaking. One that hints at competence, at control, at unpredictability. Not one that makes you lovable, one that makes you non-trivial. Because the moment your name implies consequence, others begin negotiating with your silence, not just your words. Consider this. Do you walk into a room with gravity or with need? Do others adjust their tone when you enter? Do they weigh your reactions or assume your approval? These are not accidents. These are responses to the myth you've allowed to surround you. And a myth, crafted carefully, is more durable than truth. This is how reputation becomes a weapon. It creates leverage without action. It creates fear without hostility. It creates obedience without confrontation. And this matters because a man who must always act to be respected will exhaust himself. But a man who has built the right image can enforce standards with a glance, with absence, with delay. That is power. So how do you build it? First, you control what you repeat. Repetition builds memory, and memory builds myth. If you are always available, always forgiving, always soft, you become known as easy, predictable. If you are measured, if you are scarce, if you are unpredictable in reaction, you become known as someone whose approval must be earned. Second, you protect your name. Never explain yourself to those who don't deserve clarity. Never argue in public. Never correct rumors unless they threaten your structure. Let your mystery grow. Let them wonder. Because questions about you are more powerful than answers from you. Third, you make sure your presence is tied to outcomes. Don't just be kind. Be useful. Don't just be present. Be catalytic. People respect what they can't ignore. And if your involvement changes results, your name becomes weight. Finally, understand this. Reputation is not for your ego. It is for your positioning. It's not about being admired. It's about being calculated into every decision made by others. And once they do that, once they consider you even when you're absent, you no longer need to fight. Your name fights for you. You still think power begins when it's given, when it's official, when others recognize it. But that's not how real power works. Real power is not handed to you. It is performed until it becomes undeniable. It begins in silence, in posture, in suggestion. The strongest leaders I have known didn't wait to be crowned. They acted like kings long before the crown arrived. And because they behaved as rulers, others adjusted. Slowly, then fully, until there was no distinction between appearance and authority. Most men make the fatal mistake of waiting. Waiting to be validated, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be respected. But power doesn't come to the man who waits. It comes to the man who begins moving as if he already holds it. Perception builds precedent. And if you behave with certainty, with stillness, with control, the room will shift around you. You ask, but what if they see through it? That's the wrong question. They will. At first. But consistency outlasts doubt. And every time you carry yourself with gravity, every time you remain still while others react, every time you speak only when necessary, you chip away at resistance. You build the myth, and the myth becomes a mirror. People begin to reflect it back to you. They speak more carefully in your presence. They quote your words. They anticipate your reactions. Until one day they no longer ask whether your power is real, they simply treat it as real. This is the secret the liars understand. This is why the world is ruled by men who began performing long before they had position. They looked powerful. They sounded composed. They never explained. They never flinched. And while others were busy proving their value, they were embodying it without discussion. You can hate this. You can say it's unfair. That image should not matter more than substance. But image is what opens the door to influence. Power is theater first, enforcement second. If you show up like a ruler, and you endure like one, and you speak like one, you will be treated like one. Not because others believe in you, but because you've given them no reason to doubt. And this is where most men fail. They try to claim power directly, with words, with requests, with emotional appeals. But power is not something you ask for. It is something you inhabit, quietly, repetitively, without apology. And eventually the world mirrors back what you projected long enough to become real. So don't wait for the title. Don't wait for permission. Begin now. Stand like the man they will one day obey. Speak like the man they will one day quote. Decide like the man they will one day fear losing. Because the moment you stop performing weakness and start rehearsing strength, you have already begun to rule. You're still searching for truth, still trying to uncover the hidden reality beneath the system. Still hoping that once you know what's really going on, you can finally act. But I must break this illusion for you. The men who rise, the men who rule are not obsessed with truth. They are obsessed with perception. Because perception is what moves people, what builds alliances, what manufactures loyalty. If you want influence in this world, stop trying to be right. Start learning how to be seen as right. You can have the most accurate diagnosis, the clearest insight, the deepest understanding, but if you do not shape how others perceive you and your message, you will be ignored. Or worse, replaced by someone less informed but better rehearsed. The world does not follow truth. It follows what is framed as truth. And framing is not deception. It is direction. It is the conscious shaping of how your presence is interpreted. The liar understands this instinctively. He does not need to control reality. He only needs to control what people see. He curates expressions. He selects silence. He smiles when attacked. He nods when challenged. And through these small performances, he becomes real in the minds of others. Not because he deserves it, but because he structured the lens through which they judge him. You, on the other hand, speak plainly. You show your doubts. You reveal your wounds. You say what you believe and assume others will understand. But they won't, because they're not seeing you. They're seeing the frame you failed to create, and that frame is shaped not just by what you say, but when you say it, how you look while saying it, who's watching you say it, and most importantly, how much power they already believe you have when you say it. Stop chasing truth like it's a possession. Start using it like a weapon, not to convince, but to control context. Deliver your insight inside architecture. Build the walls before you speak the words. If you walk into a room and give truth to people who are unprepared, or worse, people who benefit from ignorance, you will be torn down. But if you first establish mood, image, hierarchy, if you structure perception, your truth becomes gospel. This is why rulers invest more in optics than in reform. Why politicians hire stylists before strategists. Why priests wear robes. Why emperors hold scepters. Power is sustained by structure, and structure is made from perception. So I will tell you this plainly. Stop seeking what is real. Start deciding what will be believed. Because belief, not truth, is what governs behavior. And the man who shapes belief shapes destiny. Now you understand. You were not defeated by better men. You were not outthought. You were outperformed in the only metric this world truly rewards: perception. They smiled while lying, and they won. Not despite the lie, but because it was beautiful. Because it felt safe. Because it gave people something they could live with. You gave them the truth, and it made them uncomfortable. He gave them theater, and it made them obedient. That's the law. That's the pattern. And until you accept it, you will keep losing to men you see through, but who the world sees differently. You thought reality was your ally. That if you stood by it, defended it, spoke it without fear, you would be respected. But reality doesn't rule here. The beautiful lie does. The polished story. The illusion that flatters the crowd while controlling it. It's not cruelty that dominates, it's choreography. And those who master it, those who speak softly while tightening the noose, are praised. Remember that. Praise is not proof of righteousness, it's often a reward for smooth deception. So stop playing the fool, stop waiting for the world to wake up. It won't. Stop shouting at masks hoping they'll melt. They won't. Instead, become fluent in illusion. Speak in myth, not confession. Move with calm, not complaint. Use silence, not outrage. Wear your truth like armor beneath the robe of expectation. Let them think you've joined them. Let them lower their guard. And then, when you've structured perception, when you've made them need you, when your absence becomes more feared than your presence, only then do you act. Because the lie, once believed deeply enough, cannot be removed by truth. It must be replaced by a stronger illusion. And you, if you are wise, will become its architect. You do not destroy the game. You master it. You do not beg for reality to rule. You rule it by designing what others accept as real. That is power. Not control of the sword, control of the script.